Aloha, everybody. I'm Eva Andrade, and on this episode of the Triple F podcast, Faith and Family First, we're going to talk about something that here in Hawaii you don't hear a lot of discussion about, but on today's show you will, and that's gun laws and how it affects people right here in the state of Hawaii. So you want to stay tuned? We'll be right back. Jim Hochberg.
Yo.
We're going to be talking about a subject today you are very familiar with because are you a gun owner?
I might be.
Are you
You're
not wanting to admit?
tell people because they break into your house and steal them.
You're too funny. But, you know, one of the things that everybody's talking about.
But I do have a Great Dane and a couple of other man-eating dogs and sharks, so I'm okay. Yeah, I'm a gun owner.
Yeah, well, you're lucky that I don't bring up the other thing you like to do is you like to hunt with bow and arrows, don't you?
Sometimes I do.
Those
Those aren't guns.
I know, but I just have this vision of Jim, you know, hopping around through the forest with this bow and arrow.
Okay, so first off, you can't hunt in the forest with a bow and arrow. You know why?
Why?
All the branches are in the way.
Okay. Well, for those of you that have no idea what we're talking about, please stay tuned because we're going to talk about gun law. Now, I bumped into somebody a few days ago and they said, you know, one of the good things about living in this beautiful state is we don't have all the gun issues that you see across the nation. And they're actually right. In fact, a bill that the governor just signed was about guns. And Jim, I know you love to talk about the introduction to these bills when they talk about the findings. And they really go through a lot of pains to tell everybody how great we are right here in the state on gun safety.
So what you don't understand is the legislature in
Look,
this bill.
We got into the show. We're 5 minutes into the show, and Jim's already telling me I don't understand. So
Well,
okay,
House
Jim,
Bill-
help me understand.
House Bill 2075 is
CD1.
the bill that you're talking about. It is a response to Judge J. Michael Seabright in the U.S. District Court for the District of Hawaii, who struck down two provisions of Hawaii's gun law as unconstitutional. And part of his reasoning was that the state, trying to defend the provisions, failed to demonstrate how the provisions were sufficiently related to a legitimate government interest in Hawaii and how that requirement could push that interest forward. So in response to that, the bill, in fact, it refers to that case. The bill has almost 10 pages of findings, which is highly unusual. The reason is they're trying to give the Attorney General's department defending the law, because it's still on appeal. The case isn't over. They're buttressing with supposed facts the case for the defendants for the state. So what did the law require that the judge struck down that the legislature is now trying to put back in? That's actually what this is all about.
Well, and I can tell you that on March 29, 2022, the Attorney General submitted testimony, and I know you love the testimony by the Attorney General, and this was submitted by Holly Shikata, which is the Attorney General, or Amy Murakami. So either one of them were there in person to testify. And there's one particular part of their testimony I thought you'd be interested in. So they're basically saying what you said, why it's necessary to do this. But they say, and they have this in italics because they want to make a real point with this. They're saying if this bill is not enacted to amend the firearm statutes, permits to acquire will not expire and no firearms will be examined by law enforcement to ensure that the firearm matches the registration information and complies with Hawaii law.
So they lost on the first part of their sentence because this bill does not reinstate the 10-day expiration on the permit for a handgun. So let's really put it out there, because
I think you should.
The Second Amendment clearly says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. There is not a single word in the entire Constitution that says a woman has the right to have an abortion before viability. That was completely court created. So what the challenge in the case was, and the case was filed in 2019 because prior to that, shortly prior to that, the legislature amended the law and said, if you get a permit for a handgun, you only have 10 days to buy the gun, and then it expires. You got to go through the whole process again.
And what is the process?
Well, the process is you go to HPD and you fill out a form, an application, and then you wait 2 weeks while they check your criminal record. The form includes a waiver of your mental health records. I suppose they check your mental health records. And they have 2 weeks to do that. And then they tell you, come get your permit. So you come down to get your permit. And then you have 10 days to get your gun, and you come back to get your gun so they can check the serial number on the actual firearm against the one that you got the permit for. And so Yukutake, who filed the lawsuit, said, you know what? All of this going back to the police station all these numerous times and only having 10 days to get my gun after I get the permit, that is an unreasonable burden on my constitutional right to keep and bear arms. That unreasonable burden language is very, very familiar because that's how all the abortion regulations get struck down over all the years, right? It's an unreasonable burden on a woman's constitutional right to get an abortion.
Right.
But the Constitution says nothing about abortion, whereas the Constitution explicitly talks about gun rights. So Judge Seabright in the case, so they filed their lawsuit in 2019. They settled with the city in 2020 because the city agreed to certain of the complaints, and because you get your guns from the police department, which is city and county, right? But the legislature has the gun law, right?
Right.
And then the legislature amended the law a month after the settlement with the city to put the settlement provisions back in the law.
Okay.
And so the Yukutake filed a First Amendment complaint in October of 2020. So now he won on 2 points. It's on appeal to the Ninth Circuit by the state. Legislature comes in and amends it again. So this is this little cat and mouse game. Now, could you imagine?
Typical.
You imagine how easy it would be for us and our Christian issues if we were allowed to have the legislature fixing all the problems that we have to sue over?
Okay.
Doesn't happen.
Well, let's take the moment to do our typical little reminder of why we don't have good legislators that support our issues, because...
So I would refer you to the One Love Ministries website under sermons or something like that. And if you look up an April 28th, 2022 video, Eva and I and my wife Janet did a 2-hour presentation that's captured there on video about how to find good candidates to run, right, so that you don't end up on election day simply looking at your ballot and saying, oh gosh, I got to pick from Satan and the Antichrist.
That's right. That's right.
If you actually pursue good candidates to help get elected, you have different people.
That's right. Now, it's too late if you're listening or watching this right now and you're like, I'm kind of thinking about running for office. Well, it's a little late now because we've passed the deadline. But you do want to make sure you stay plugged into Hawaii Family Forum because we are going to be doing our candidate survey. Our questions have been developed, and some of you participated in helping come up with those questions. We'll ignore the few weird people that wanted us to ask, should murder be legalized and stuff like that, because that's a little odd.
Well, it is. It's called abortion.
Yes. Well, but you know what?
But it may not be.
When we're talking about guns, right? I have to laugh at how many times I'll hear somebody go, but guns kill people. And then somebody will come back and say, guns do not kill people. People kill people using a gun.
So let's get back to what this case is about, because I think it's a great parallel for context to compare it to abortion. So you don't need a permit to get an abortion. You just need to believe that you're pregnant. I think you actually have to be pregnant. But anyway, imagine if...
But you can be a man or a woman and have an abortion.
Seriously, imagine if you find out you're pregnant and the doctor writes you a permit to get an abortion, that you cannot get an abortion without that permit. but you only have 10 days to get the abortion. That's what the case was about. How come I can only have 10 days to buy my handgun? What if it's not available? We got these shipping backlogs. We got, all kinds of merchandise. Am I taking too long, Dan?
No, I was getting a phone call because even though my phone is off, because I have
you have a Dick Tracy watch.
I have
right.
I have an iWatch watch.
So,
okay, yeah, sorry.
Anyway, imagine that you only had 10 days to get an abortion. That's what this gun law was. Okay. And Judge J. Michael Seabright in the U.S. District Court for the District of Hawaii said that there's no showing by the Attorney General in response to the case why a 10-day limit was needed. So he struck it. And then there was a requirement that he also struck that said you had to bring the gun within 5 days of getting it, within 10 days of getting the permit, to HPD in person for them to compare the serial numbers. And Judge Seabright said that's unconstitutional too. So all this bill does is puts back in the 5 days for in-person inspection after the fact. So you have 10 days to buy the gun. That's out. Now you have an unlimited time to buy the gun, although all the permits expire within a year. So the AGs were fudging the truth on that. You go get your gun. You have 5 days to bring it in and let HPD confirm the serial number. I don't really have a problem with that. It's a burden, and the bad guys aren't going to do it anyway because they're not buying guns legally. They aren't even applying for permits and all that stuff. So it does kind of bug me that they're making law-abiding citizens jump through all these hula hoops, and they do nothing about the illegal guns that are out there. But anyway, so that's the bill and that's the case. And you're exactly right. Hawaii has some pretty extensive gun control legislation. You have to complete a safety course before you qualify to get a permit to buy a gun. There's different permits in Hawaii for handguns and for what are called long guns, rifles, shotguns, muskets, muzzle loaders, all that kind of stuff. In order to submit your permit application, you have to waive your HIPAA privacy rights on your mental health records. And so you have to tell them who your doctor is and all that stuff. And then I guess the police department has mental health record checkers. Otherwise, why do they bother asking you to do that? There's a whole bunch of people in Hawaii that are barred from possessing firearms. And those are people with substance abuse problems, mental health issues, certain kinds of criminal records. And there are certain kinds of firearms that you can't buy in Hawaii: automatic weapons, short-barreled shotguns, and firearms with other kind of specialized features, the bump stock thing and all that kind of stuff. And then there's also the requirement that you come in 5 days to get your serial number confirmed by HPD. Now, it used to be that the line was very, very long. And when the city and county of Honolulu settled the case, the Yukutaki case with the plaintiffs, they said, we'll let you do the application by email. That is what the amendment was, which led to the second filing by Yakutaki. So anyway, you have to be fingerprinted to get a gun in Hawaii too. So what the legislature says in 10 pages of stuff is questionably untrue. So what they say
the findings,
yes, the findings. They say that we have the lowest incidences of firearm crime. That is true. They claim it's because of the restrictions on gun ownership. I don't think that's true. I think culturally, our society is different than Chicago and Houston and Los Angeles. And
I would agree with you on that.
It's not because of gun control, because gun control doesn't work in those places. Chicago has illegal to own a gun. Everybody gets shot every weekend. Not everybody. A lot of people get shot every weekend in Chicago, LA, DC, Houston. So, but the reason that they put it all in the bill is so that it can be shown to Judge Seabright. So hopefully Mr. Beck, who's Mr. Yukutaki's lawyer, will criticize these findings in front of Judge Seabright when it comes back from the Ninth Circuit.
Are you going to follow that case? Are you interested at all?
Of course, I'm interested. I have a case pending in district court here for concealed carry permits that my judge said, let's wait until the Ninth Circuit rules on the open carry case out of the Big Island. The Ninth Circuit said, let's wait until the Supreme Court rules coming up very soon on the New York concealed carry case. So that's all going to roll downhill. So probably this calendar year, I'm going to have something happen in my concealed carry case in the city and county
So
of
what
Honolulu.
does Hawaii state law say about concealed carry?
Well, it's interesting. What concealed carry law said, the reason we challenged them, the law is the chief of police of each county has almost unbridled discretion to grant or deny. And in the city and county of Honolulu, it says you have to prove a need for defense either in your business or otherwise outside of your home.
So you can't unless you satisfy
You prove
these
you
requirements.
satisfy, and it's a totally subjective thing. So when we filed our lawsuit in 2018, I believe, one concealed carry permit in the last 10 years had been issued in Hawaii.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So that kind of discretion with a government official is unconstitutional.
So my mother's family is from Missouri, and so they're a hunting family. Okay. So her family grew up around guns and they have a whole different opinion. My dad, born and raised here, Hawaii boy, very different opinion about guns because, as you mentioned, we're different here in Hawaii. But I have to give you my one story of my own experience. I'm in Ohio, right, visiting my daughter and her family, and they have concealed carry there, and they're very proud of it. So we are sitting in their living room, and they go, "Would you like to see our guns?" And I'm there in the room with like 5 or 6 people. They all whip out these guns, and they're showing me that. I'm sitting there in the room full of guns, and I thought to myself, I mean, I guess for them, because they've grown up around that, they have a certain respect for it. They're not afraid of it. They understand the law. They have to go through their own. So here in Hawaii, we are different. And so that is my Portuguese-winded way of saying I do agree with you that we look at things differently here in Hawaii.
The NRA, National Rifle Association, big boogeyman to the anti-gun folk.
Well, they're they do have a lot of money in their gun lobby. I mean, when we talk about some of these lobbyists.
And with $70 million of their money, they have a project called Project Child Safe, which is very interesting. They want to promote firearms safety, and they actually have a whole division of their materials that are for parents and gun owners. And listen to the topics that and people need to go to Project Child Safe. And while you're watching the show, please go and look this up.
We'll put the link for those of you watching on YouTube.
They talk about safety with storage in your home, having it locked, having it in a safe, having all that kind of stuff. They talk about understanding youth mental health and preventing access to unauthorized firearms. That's a big deal. That's where some of these school shooters and mass shooters are motivated. It's because they have mental health issues. I saw a conversation on Twitter where somebody said, it's untrue that most people with mental health issues are mass murderers. And I actually responded. I don't usually get involved, but I actually said, nobody says most people with mental health problems are mass shooters. What the problem is most mass shooters are people with mental health problems.
We learned that in logic a long time ago.
And that's different.
Yeah.
But anyway, so then they talk about, there's a webinar, a guide for parents. Listen to the discussion between the CEO and president, a guy named Joe Bartozzi, as well as distinguished guests Doreen Marshall, vice president for mission engagement at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, Sherry Moloch, associate professor at Georgetown University. They discuss how parents can help teenagers who may be struggling with mental health issues and make homes safer for those who may be at risk of self-harm. This is good stuff, and they have quizzes about firearm safety. So the point is, guns are safe, and I will prove it to you. You may have been watching the newspaper in May, or it might have been June this year, the Star Advertiser, and there were some letters to the editor around the time that the Uvalde school shooting happened. And I actually sent one into.
And let's just take a moment really quick that Jim and I and all of the crew here at Faith and Family First send our greatest love and best wishes to the families in Uvalde who are dealing with this issue. And actually, if anybody's dealt with this issue, our hearts go out to them.
Well,
the family.
The fact is, on the day that I saw it in the news, I prayed for it.
Well, and I think, but see, the thing about a death, regardless of how it happens, for a family who's lost
Correct.
a child, it's an ongoing sadness, and our hearts are going to be with them.
But if I can, I want to share the letter that I wrote that went unpublished. Sometimes they publish mine, sometimes they don't. This one didn't get published. And the headline was, "Why Are Those Guns So Hurtful?" And I wrote, "Americans are free to keep and bear guns because of the Second Amendment to the Constitution. Bullets fly from gun barrels when the safety is off, the round is ready, and the trigger is engaged. I'm one of 9,280 Hawaii gun owners, according to the statistics for 2021, but not one of my guns has ever shot a person, a car, or a house. Why are my guns so well behaved not to show up where they don't belong and not to discharge unsafely? No bullet has left my gun's barrel aimed at another human being, house, car, or other target that would cause injury. How many guns were used to shoot other people or in an armed robbery where no one was shot? But we hear so often that guns are the reason people die or are injured at school, at work, at play, or in war. Why are those guns so hurtful, but mine aren't?" And the reason is, it's the people pulling the trigger. It's not the gun. If guns kill people, spoons make some people fat.
Okay, and that leaves a very interesting thought for people. But one thing that is being discussed this week, and so as people are hearing this, they're watching what's happening in Congress, right? And right now in the Senate, 10 Republicans have indicated that they may vote for this new gun bill that they're working on, which means that if they get those 10 Republicans and all 50 of the senators that are Democrat vote, there's no way to have a filibuster. So they're looking positively at this new potential bill. So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so to be perfectly honest, it's not a bill. It's called a framework, which means they've identified the points they're going to include. And because of all the points that they are not including, which the House has wanted forever, there are probably some Democrat senators that are not going to go for it, the more progressive ones. But all it is they put a committee together of 10 Democrats and 10 Republicans. They worked together and they came up with the framework. They want to raise the age to 21 for long guns, I believe.
And most Americans agree with that.
Well, actually in Hawaii, it's 16. And if you're not 16, or it's 21 for a gun, you can use a gun if you're 16. You can't own it if you're hunting with a parent or something like that. And I think you can even hunt younger than that. But anyway, so this framework is very narrow. It's not addressing the kinds of things that the Democrats want, which is
the House.
In the House, to take the assault weapons away, to do other things. But the one thing that's troublesome in the bill framework is this red flag aspect. And the red flag aspect, some states have passed them. What it does is it says that under certain circumstances, either the chief of police or the attorney general or a family member or a friend or other person can file papers in court.
Which means anybody.
Correct. Can file papers in court asking the court to order that a person's firearms be confiscated because there are sufficient red flags in their life that they shouldn't have them. And the person who's the subject of the confiscation doesn't get notice at the very beginning. So the way it could play out is a soon-to-be ex-wife or some other person with an axe to grind for a different reason.
An ex-employee who was fired.
Could file these papers alleging certain things that the gun owner finds out when the police knock on the door to take the guns. Now, the penalty in Hawaii, the penalty for falsely alleging red flags is a misdemeanor, which is the same penalty that you would get for violating the COVID curfews and restrictions. Maximum 1 year in jail, maximum $5,000 fine, something in between, lower combination or whatever. Most of the time, people don't go to jail for misdemeanors. So the problem with those red flag laws is the Fourth Amendment guarantees you to be free from unreasonable seizure of your stuff. And that could be a very unreasonable seizure of your stuff, depending on what's alleged and what's true or not true. Is there a need? Yes. And I think the better way is, instead of letting anybody do this, it should require mental health professionals' request. And therefore, it's up to the family and friends of people with red flag problems to go to a mental health person and get them involved.
And they did that.
They're qualified.
And they did that with assisted suicide. You remember when they passed that here? They made a very big deal about that mental health. And actually, let's be honest, every single news channel right now, every talking head is talking about mental health. Mental health is a very big issue, and that should be addressed. Yes. And I think everyone agrees that somebody who's suffering from mental health issues should not have a weapon, any kind of weapon.
And watch our next coming up show, because we're going to talk with Susan Duffy about mental health at school.
Yes, we are. And all the shenanigans that can come. We talk about shenanigans a lot, don't we, on this show?
That's because of your Mrs. O'Leary rhyme.
I know.
Your Irish shenanigans.
Oh, 1, 2, 3, O'Leary. For those of you that know what that is, comment below, because
yeah, I'd like to know what it is. She throws this stuff
I throw this stuff up, I do.
So the other thing that Project Safe, Child Safe does is they give away free gun locks everywhere in the country. So the HPD probably has the thing. So go look at Project Child Safe, and if you do have a firearm, look into it. Go get yourself a free gun lock so that you've made your own firearm safe.
Yep. And right here in the state of Hawaii, we are proud of the fact that we do have some good laws on the books. And I know that there are always ways we can tweak it and make it better. And Jim, and if you had your best wish on how to fix the gun laws right here in Hawaii, I'm sure we could do a whole show on that alone. But we don't have much time left, but we do want you to like, subscribe, and share this video. Please share it with your friends. Some channels have millions of viewers and we don't have as much, but we know we have powerful viewers because we hear from you all the time. So send us an email at info@hawaiifamilyforum.org or jim@jameshochberglaw.com.
Support the show.
Support the show. And we do want to hear from you. And again, as Jim mentioned, you want to stay tuned for the next week's show, because we are going to be talking about some interesting stuff that you may or may not know about. So as always, we'll see you next week, and thank you for spending this last half an hour with us.
Aloha.
Aloha, everybody.